just to clarify, so you're in, I assume with your area code, you're in California? Are you in LA or Santa Monica?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I guess to start, before we get into what we really want to talk about, let me start with this question. Um, what was the first music that I guess that originally that was played in your house before, I guess, obviously before the advent before you got into rock and roll? What was the kind of music that was played in your home as you were growing up?
Uh, my parents were fans of like Nat King Cole. This is in the 50s.
Right.
So, and my mother also liked Broadway musicals. So there was, My Fair Lady and Brigadoon and that kind of stuff.
Right. And as a young person before rock and roll, I mean, did you also like this stuff, or were you looking for your own music early on?
I was looking for my own music early on. I mean, my older brother was a Elvis fan, so I mean, I heard, Hound Dog in 1956, I guess. So I was like 7 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
And then, began to listen to Little Richard and Fats Domino in the late 50s.
Right.
Chuck Berry.
Right.
And then, and then I found folk music, which was, probably 1959, 1960.
Right. Well, I was listening to your memoir on Audible, and it's a terrific book, by the way. It's a lot of fun to read if anyone hasn't read it, The Magic Years. And you talk about how, I guess, your older brother brought home Dylan's first album, I guess, from college, and that was the kind of one of those, I guess, markers in your life musically. I'm guessing.
Totally.
That album, the self-titled debut album, Bob Dylan 62, which was fun, which was interesting. I just recently went back to listen to those early recordings because, as you know, Harry Belafonte passed away earlier this year, and a lot of people forgot that Dylan's first time on a actual recording is playing harmonica on a Belafonte record.
Yeah.
The Midnight Special. And I was telling people that, and a lot of people don't know that. That's kind of one of those little fun facts.
Yeah, and then he also played on a record from Carolyn Hester. He played harmonica on it.
Right. And as I was reading your book, what's kind of fun, particularly I guess in the mid the 60s part and the early 70s part, you were born in I believe 47, so you're born a few years, but if people are interested in this book, the early chapters, they kind of read like a kind of a parallel track version to the movie Almost Famous, in a funny way, is what's popping into my head, because you're kind of at all these kind of key focal points in that period, musically.
Well, I was very fortunate. I was, the right place at the right time a lot of times in my early life. And I mean, a lot of that's just being open to chance. But, certainly Newport Folk Festival in 1965 is one of those, break moments in culture where, everything changes. And that certainly had a lot of effect on my life.
Right. And, I mean, to kind of jump around here, it kind of comes full circle because I guess, 40 years later, Scorsese does the No Direction Home documentary, which the highlight is the footage from that festival of Dylan going electric. Is one of the highlights. and and then I was really just going on before we get to what I really want to talk about. But I was really fascinated on the chapters on the concert for Bangladesh, which you produced, which has had this very I guess up and down history on it being made available, at least the film, on Blu-ray and 4. I don't know if a 4K will ever come, but I mean that's that album is I was not I was not born when it came out, but my dad and my older brother had it, so it was one I always listened to as a kid. Particularly the highlight for me was always the Leon Russell performance from that show.
Jumping Jack Flash.
Yes.
Yeah.
The piano version of that.
Well, I mean, Leon was the kind of band leader, if you want to use that term. In other words, when George decided to do it, Leon was one of the first people he called, and Ringo and Klaus Foreman, who was an old friend of George's from Germany, who was going to play bass, and Eric Clapton was going to play lead guitar, and George was going to play guitar, but Leon's piano playing was kind of the core of that, and that plus Billy Preston kind of made the whole thing work as a band.
I'm wondering, because that was George's first kind of major endeavor after the Let It Be, project that kind of that happened that closed out the Beatles. I'm wondering your thoughts. I'm assuming you watched that Get Back documentary. I'm wondering what insight you gained from that, seeing it that was kind of the right before the concert for Bangladesh.
Well, I kind of knew all that stuff because George was very open, sharing with me about his frustration with the Beatles. I mean, look, he was a great songwriter, and yet John and Paul would only let him do 2 songs an album.
Right.
So he was writing all these songs, but he had no place to put them. And so that was the kind of frustration that led to All Things Must Pass, and then led to the concert for Bangladesh. I mean, he wanted to do more, and my sadness is, and I said this to him at the time, I said, you don't have to break up the Beatles to do your own thing, you can do both. But somehow they didn't see that, and it's a real tragedy, because there was no reason that the band had to break up just because they each wanted to do something individual. They could have done both.
Did you interact with? In your life? Did you interact with all the Beatles, or just George and Ringo? Did you?
No, I interacted with everybody but Paul. In other words, when we did the Isle of Wight concert with Bob Dylan and the band in England, George, John, and Ringo and their wives all came to the Isle of Wight in a helicopter and landed on the backyard of this house that we rented for Bob. And so we spent a couple of days together, and some great music was made, and they were all friends from before, because John had hung out with Bob a lot. And so, I mean, Paul didn't come because his wife had just had a baby, so that was too bad. But I think, you could tell at that point that they still really liked each other.
Well, I don't know if you have one, but I gotta ask, do you have a memory or a story, a John Lennon story?
My time being around him was really about what was the music that they would share between John and the band and Bob, and it turned out to all be like rockabilly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was that was the kind of connecting thread. You know, Carl Perkins.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of music was what they all grew up on,
mm-hmm.
and they all knew how to play together, and they all knew all those tunes.
Mm.
I mean, you know, that's what I realized that John Lennon grew up on the same kind of music that the band did.
Mm-hmm. Right. And and from Bangladesh you go on, I guess, to the other side of the across the street, and you go deal with the Stones for during the kind of the very dark, tumultuous exile sessions.
Right.
And you helped with you got them the album cover, which one of the big things you were able to get out of to put together. With Robert.
Yeah, I mean, that story was, you know, a kind of longer story in the sense that they asked me if I wanted to be the tour manager for their tour mm-hmm. to support Exile on Main Street. And I went to the south of France to visit them. I mean, they sent me a plane ticket and I went to visit them. And I concluded ultimately that I didn't really want to do it because I had a kind of bad experience with Eric Clapton during Bangladesh in terms of someone with a fairly serious heroin habit.
Right.
And Keith Richards clearly had that. And so I declined that. But when they came to the States to mix Exile on Main Street, they came to Los Angeles, I reconnected with Nick, and he was kind of looking for ideas for a record cover. And so I went up to his house one night, and I brought this book called The Americans by Robert Frank, which is just an extraordinary book of photographs taken in 1955 across the country. And I said to Nick, look, everyone knows what the Stones look like. You don't need to put yourself on the cover of the record. Why don't you put one of these great Robert Frank pictures like this picture of a guy standing in front of a jukebox, or, you know, a preacher by a river or something. This is a real American blues album that you made. And so Nick picked up the book and was just fascinated by it, and he said, this is so good and everything. And he said, let's get this guy to take our picture. And I said, this book was made in 1955. I don't even know if the guy's still alive. I said, you know, the last I heard of him, he made some, you know, kind of B movie with Alan Ginsberg called Eat My Daisy or something, Pull My Daisy. And so, and Nick said, oh, John, you can find him. Come on. Tell him the Stones want to pay him $20,000 to take their picture and show up. And so I went and, you know, it's a long story, but I went and finally found him. And it turned out to be a really good, I mean, the cover won the Grammy for Best Album Cover of the Year. It was really good meeting of artistic minds.
And since I know you didn't you declined to put on the produce that concert tour, but did you go to the shows when they did tour?
Oh yeah.
Because if listeners haven't seen it, it's just a few years ago they finally released on DVD and Blu-ray the concert film from that era, Ladies and Gentlemen. the Rolling Stones, which is,
Right.
some have argued, and I have a hard time disagreeing, that is actually probably their best concert film. Of all the concert films that they've done, that probably is the one that really captures them at their performative peak, if anyone wants to see the Ladies and Gentlemen concert. And same thing with the accompanying soundtrack CD that they finally released. That's just one of the great live performances, was that period.
Yeah, look, they were at their height. It's just, there was also a lot of baggage to go along with it.
Well, now, I mean, I don't know if you've seen them. I've seen them. I've seen them obviously in their later years. I saw them in Voodoo Lounge and the 40 Licks tour, and so now it's kind of a more well-oiled, efficient machine that they now put on, and it's still a great show. So from there, that I guess is what I want to talk to you about. So from there, you decided you had this idea like that want to get into producing movies, and you, I guess at the time you thought it's got to be a little easier than producing a concert, and that's how you got into the, I guess. So how exactly did that parlay into Mean Streets?
I left Woodstock. I had been living in Woodstock, and after I finished Bangladesh, I realized that none of the bands that I wanted to work for wanted to go on the road. And the big touring act of 73 was Alice Cooper, and that was not really my kind of music. And so I went to California, and a friend had given me a name of somebody to look up. His name is Marty Scorsese, and he said he's a film editor, and he edited Woodstock, and the Woodstock movie documentary, and you'll share a lot of common musical tastes. So I called him up, and he came up to visit me. I had a house in Laurel Canyon, and he brought this script called Season of the Witch. And I was just a naive kid, 24 years old, 25 years old, and didn't know you weren't supposed to put your own money into making movies. And he showed me all his student films, and I really liked them. And I just made a bet, okay, this guy could be good. And so I put up some of my money and got one of my friends to put up half, and we raised $500,000, and we just went and made it. And luckily, Marty made a really good movie, and we were able to sell it to Warner Brothers, and the rest is history, And I continued to make movies with him. I made The Last Waltz with him in the band, and that worked out really well too. So, it was just fortune, being in the right place, meeting people, using your gut instincts. Somebody could be good, and I think that's pretty much the way my life has gone all the time.
Well, so, as people know, and people have always pointed out, and this is the reason we're having this interview is because that movie turns 50 this year, and it seems, and I don't think anyone would argue that movie and the movie that came out a couple of months before it, American Graffiti, they really kind of set a new standard on the way pop music was used in movies. Now, to be clear, pop music had been used in movies before, Graduate, Midnight Cowboy, Kenneth Anger's Scorpio Rising, but not to the way they were used in those two movies. And to the point, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the occupation of music supervisor did not exist when you were working on Mean Streets.
No, it didn't exist at all. Look, I mean, the trope of using a pop tune always had, before Marty and George Lucas, always had to have the idea that there was a radio playing somewhere in the room, in the My Baby in this tune, in this scene. I don't have to pretend there's a radio on, and so, and I don't want a score. I don't want strings and a composer to try and goose emotions. I want to use real music. And they just went and did it. And you're right. This has changed everything.
Well, I'm curious. So what I've heard stories in later years that, when Scorsese's working on the script with his writers, like Nicholas Pileggi tells a story that when they were working on Goodfellas, and Pileggi's at the typewriter writing, Scorsese says, "Write the word cream in that scene, cream." And Pileggi's like, I don't know, what are you talking about? Just write the word cream. And Marty knew that the scene he was gonna use "Cream, Sunshine of Your Love" for the sequence. And so I'm curious, going back to Mean Streets, did he give you a list, or was it in the script like, I need these songs for this movie? How did that come about, picking those 20?
No. So what he did was, as we were editing, he would choose the song he wanted and just get the sound editor would take it off a record and put it behind the scenes. So I mean, all the songs that were in the rough cut were the songs that ended up in the movie, including the Rolling Stones song.
Okay. So I assume, so he shows you this, like, these are the songs, and then I guess it's now up to you to, like, well, I guess I got to go clear that.
Yeah, I mean, but look, in those days, nobody was buying songs to go behind music.
Right.
So, with the exception of the Rolling Stones, it was all cheap. Mm-hmm. I think, the Ronettes was like $1,500 or something. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It wasn't expensive to buy those tunes. Today, it's, $500,000 to buy a famous song, to put it in a movie. So, I mean,
on a side note, I'm wondering if you agree, and I don't know if you've read Stephen Van Zandt's memoir, but in Unrequited Infatuations, and in his book, he advocates for kind of a tier rate system for publishing. He goes, because he claimed, artists who when they've gotten, when they charge these astronomical rates, movie productions can't afford them. And he goes, this is how this music is going to disappear if people can't eventually afford your music.
Right.
There's only a handful of us who are still around. He goes, there's Scorsese. He goes, there's David Chase, and there's a couple others who, appreciate this old music, and they're still keeping it alive. But eventually, it's going to be out. The cost is not going to be worth it, and this music's not going to stay alive.
Well, that's greed on the part of the publishers.
Right.
And I totally agree with Stephen. I mean, he's completely right on that. And there's enough problems with people not having any historical memory of the music that came before, but that makes it worse.
Mm-hmm. And also, I guess one question I did want to ask you, and maybe you can give your side of the story, set the record straight, and that obviously one of the most iconic use of music in Mean Streets is the opening credit sequence with the Ronettes' "Be My Baby," and Phil Spector, the late Phil Spector, who was obviously, a genius in the recording studio, but outside the recording studio was a very different person, unfortunately, and he prone to kind of very grandiose statements. He claims he was very upset when he saw that sequence and so forth, and that he didn't give permission and so forth. So I'm wondering if you want to set the record straight on that.
Phil Spector had nothing to do with it. He had long since sold that publishing rights of that song to a publisher, music publisher.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he had no approval rights or anything. I mean, look, Phil Spector had enough problems in his life. I think that's just nonsense.
Okay. And so, when that movie came out, what was that like? The Cannes and the New York Film Festival receptions. Talk about what was.
Well, it's great. I mean, look, that was a different time. It was a period when film critics meant a lot. So, Pauline Kael, who was the film critic for the New Yorker, wrote this 6,000-word essay on Mean Streets and just basically said this is one of the most important new directors in the world, and so it was a breakthrough. It obviously changed my life, changed Marty's life, changed Bob De Niro's life. Mm-hmm. It was a great time. And there was a lot of other good independent movies at that time. This was not an era of blockbusters.
Right.
This was the era of 5 easy pieces and, Terry Malick movies and The Conversation. And, there were a lot of really important, Last Picture Show. Just lots of extraordinary movies getting made in this same period, and we were all lucky to be able to do them, and they were all made for reasonably small amounts of money, too.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is kind of a technical question. I don't know if since you're the producer of the movie, and I don't know if you keep up with it, do you know if any plans to put Mean Streets out on a 4K Blu-ray disc at any time soon?
Yeah. It's in the works. I just finished recording some commentary for it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Criterion.
Really?
Criterion's going to put out. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's. I assume that'll be sometime next year.
Maybe by Christmas.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, great. That sounds amazing. Okay. Just to kind of go through this before we get to your present day, I do want to ask about The Last Waltz, and I guess tell the story. So Scorsese, he goes on and he does Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, and he does Taxi Driver, and then he finally gets to do one of his first dream project, which is New York, the musical, and he's in the middle of just starting that. And you and Robbie Robertson go to him. It's like, and how did that start? You basically go to see if he wants to do The Last Waltz. And so how did that go? That meeting go?
Well, Robbie came to me and said, "Look, we're going to have this final concert and then call it a day." Mm-hmm. And I've got Neil Young and Eric Clapton and Muddy Waters, and I got this incredible lineup of people, and I think it needs to be filmed. And he said, "Who do you think we could get to film it?" And I said, "Well, Marty would be the ideal guy to do it, but he's in the middle of this film, New York, New York. And but if you want, we can go see him." So I called him up and I said, "Can Robbie and I come over and visit with you?" And he said, "Sure." So we came over and we explained to him what we wanted to do, and there was one night of filming on a Thanksgiving, and Marty says, "I'm doing it." He said, "You can't tell United Artists who are financing New York, New York, because I'm under exclusive contract, but we're going to do it." And then the good thing was that in Hollywood, Thanksgiving is a long holiday. Mm-hmm. Because it's on a Thursday, so they give you a half day Wednesday, and then you not have to be back to work till Monday. So we got a plane to take us up to San Francisco on Wednesday night, Friday, and Marty got all the best cinematographers in Hollywood. He got Michael Chapman and Bill Sigmund and Laszlo Kovacs and Hiro Narita. I mean, it's just extraordinary group of DPs, and it was a fabulous evening.
Now, is it true the story I've read, and maybe you can clarify this, is that everyone was okay to be filmed and they're ready for this film, but Dylan was a little skittish, and he had to take some last minute convincing because he was also in the middle of putting together Ronaldo and Clara.
That's true. Bob was surrounded by people who were, kind of boyhood friends. He no longer had a professional manager. He had a guy named Louis Kemp, who was a kid from Hibbing, who was kind of ostensibly his manager. And they were in the middle of shooting Ronaldo and Clara. And so we thought we had an agreement that Bob would let us film, and then at the last minute, Louis Kemp was objecting, and then so we got to an agreement that we could film 3 songs of the 5 that Bob was doing. And so we did that, and then Bob was having so much fun doing it that he kind of just segued into another song that was not planned at all, called Baby Let Me Follow You Down. And you can see him make the change, and you can see Rick Danko kind of pick up on it, and he knew the song, obviously, because they had played it way back in the 60s together. And Louis Kemp was freaking out. You can't film this song. You can't film this song. And Bill Graham literally almost threw him off the side of the stage. I mean, he was, get out of here, you fuck. It was like, it was very funny. Bill Graham just tore his head off. And so, we got it in the can, and it was all fabulous.
And so that was Thanksgiving '76. And of course, the movie doesn't come out till spring '78. Was that a case of Marty kind of like, Scorsese? Okay, I'm going to go finish New York, and then I will get back to editing The Last Waltz. Or was he doing?
Well, that was partly it. It was also kind of. What shall I say? Marty and Robbie started living in the same house together.
Right.
They both were out of marriages. Their marriages were falling apart. They were both taking far too much Bolivian marching powder, and they would get these ideas to do other scenes and other things. And we sold the movie to United Artists and had a big profit, and they proceeded to basically burn through all of that money, both on the big sound stage with Emmylou Harris and the Staple Singers, and then worse, on the mixing stage, Robbie acted as if it was like a recording studio. And I don't know if you've been on a sound mixing stage, but there was about 14 or 15 people involved, with film reels backing and forward, and 3 guys on a mixing column. I mean, it's incredibly expensive.
Right.
And it just went on and on and on and on, and that's why it took so long.
Was it because Scorsese had an exclusive deal with United Artists for New York, New York. So was it kind of a relief when United Artists said, okay, we'll take that one also?
Yeah, yeah. Well, they kind of had us over a barrel because Marty wasn't supposed to have done it,
And then just to go through the 80s real quick, and you kind of diversified in your subject matter in the 80s. I mean, Under Fire, which unfortunately is a forgotten political classic from the early 80s. There was a handful of those that came out in the early 80s that, I'm thinking of like De Palma's Blowout and Costa-Gavras' Missing, were all of that. And Under Fire has one of the great Nick Nolte performances that maybe people
it's a great movie.
Don't know.
It's I think it is underappreciated, but it really holds up. I mean, it's one of the best American political movies there is, I think. And, obviously it came out right at the beginning of the Reagan era, and so the politics of it were very left-wing compared to what was when we had our first screening of it in Washington, D.C. at the Motion Picture Academy, several Reagan, including Alexander Haig, who was Secretary of State, walked out of the screening very prominently in the middle of it.
How did I'm kind of curious because I think he's an underrated filmmaker, and I wish he'd gotten better work as he went on. How did Roger Spottiswoode come to your attention?
He was a film editor, and I had a lot of luck with film editors. He'd made one feature before, but he worked with a friend of mine named Carol Rise, who'd also made a Nick Nolte movie.
Who'll Stop the Rain?
It's called Who'll Stop the Rain.
Great movie. People need to set up. It's a great movie.
Yeah. And so, he read the script, and then he got Ron Shelton, who was a friend of his, to rewrite the script. And then, it just somehow we got Nick and Gene Hackman to do it. Mm-hmm. And then, Orion, the guys from United Artists who had done The Last Waltz had formed this new company called Orion, and so they agreed to finance it. And, it is a really good movie. You're right. It holds up really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Carol Reese is a great filmmaker. The Gambler with James Caan is a great movie. Like I said, Who'll Stop the Rain is a great movie. Like I said, Under Fire. It had a great poster. I remember as a kid, I liked the cover art on the VHS tape with Nick Nolte with that camera. It's just a very kind of evocative.
And it also has a great movie score by Jerry Goldsmith. One of the best scores with Pat Metheny playing guitar.
Right.
It's really exceptional.
Which got a little bit of prominence with Tarantino's The Hateful Eight. So he used a track from the score in The Hateful Eight that caught a lot of us by surprise. And then another film you did that I find, because it seems kind of out of character with the rest of the films you did, you produced the teen science comedy, My Science Project. That's correct, in 1980?
Yeah, I was at Walt Disney. I had saved Walt Disney from a corporate raid. I was, had just had a bunch. I had 3 children. I was kind of in an era when it was kind of an innocent time, and they just handed me this movie and said, "Would you produce it?" It wasn't something that I initiated at all. It was something, and Walt, the people at Walt Disney wanted to please me because I had saved their company from a corporate raid, and so I did it. You know, it's an okay movie, but it's not one I'm. It won't be in my obituary. Put it that way.
Well, the interesting thing, though, the two leads, I guess they went on to be filmmakers. John Stockwell and Fisher Stevens have gone on to actually film.
No, the cast was great. I mean, they're good kids. They were really Raphael Sabara, all those guys were nice people to be with.
Well, and also,
you know, the movie from that period that I like the most is To Die For.
The Gus
with Nicole Kidman.
And Gus Van Sant. Yeah, that was
Gus Van Sant. Yeah. I mean, I think that is another not well appreciated movie. But I mean, from Nicole, you know, got nominated for a Golden Globe for her performance, and I think it's just a world-class performance, and maybe one of the best things she ever did.
Yeah, I was a sophomore in high school when that came out, and actually I read the book, and then I saw the movie, and the movie was a great adaptation of that book. And I remember at the time that movie was being sort of, in critical circles, being billed as Gus Van Sant's kind of comeback, because he was coming off of Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, which did not go well. And I was going to ask you about the Nicole Kidman thing, because she got the Golden Globe nomination, so I assumed there was an Oscar campaign, but it didn't pan out the way one had.
Yeah, it didn't come out the way we had hoped. That's true.
Mm-hmm. And then the one film, I guess it took a long time, but I guess the one film that you finally got to get back to what it should be is the Vin Vendors movie. Until the end of the
I mean, well, finally Criterion put out the long version. You know, I mean, look, Vin made essentially what was two movies. You know, and the first rough cut was 6 hours and 40 minutes. You know what I'm saying? And you know, we had a contract with Warner Brothers in the United States to deliver a 2 hour and 50-minute movie. So to go from a 6 hour rough cut to 2 hour 50 is tough. Mm-hmm. And so it, you know, and for them it was really hard. Mm-hmm. But eventually we got the long version put out on Criterion, and that to me, again, it's a very prescient movie. You know, I mean, Vim understood the notion of people being addicted to their little handheld screens long before anybody else was thinking about stuff like that.
Right.
You know, and I think, again, incredible use of music.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the soundtrack of the movie is extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Was it? I assume it was rough, heartbreaking when you would read reviews when the movie came out in '91, and to almost every review, the critic would say, "Good ideas here, but it feels like this movie has been edited at random." And clearly, you know, a lot of the critics didn't know it was a 6 hour movie, but you know, they could tell.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, looking back, I mean, you make mistakes in your life, in your career. I mean, I should have just said, okay, we'll put out part one, and you know, and then we'll put out part two later. I mean, it's you know, people do that all the time. I mean, I guess the Tom Cruise movie, Mission Impossible, is part one and part two, right? It was too long. So, I mean, we could have done that. Of course, we didn't have the clout that Tom Cruise has, so, you know. But 2020 hindsight.
Good. Well, and I guess to get to what you're at presently, and so you've written a couple of books about kind of cautionary books about kind of technology, and this new book you have is about kind of wealth and the kind of the imbalance that's going on in the country right now. So I guess the first book I want to talk about, you wrote about Move Fast, Break Things. Was I guess tell us about that book to set us up to the new book you have coming out. I think these two books are related.
Yeah, they are related. So Move Fast and Break Things basically came out of a sense that I had that the internet was screwing up the life of creative artists completely, and that it was also screwing up democracy. And at that time, when I wrote it in 2015 and it came out in late 2016, that was a controversial thing, that maybe social media is not such a good thing. So the new book is called The End of Reality, How 4 Billionaires Are Selling a Fantasy Future of the Metaverse, Mars, AI, and Crypto. And essentially the thesis of the new book is that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Mark Andreessen and Peter Thiel, the 4 richest guys in tech, are not really interested in helping save the planet that we're living on. They're interested in creating a fantasy world that you're going to go live in, whether that means Elon Musk's Martian space colonies or Mark Zuckerberg's notion that you'll spend 8 hours a day with a virtual reality helmet on your head, or Mark Andreessen's notion that we have to have a whole new currency called crypto, and that art will be NFTs, and you'll buy a Bored Ape for $50,000 and maybe never be able to sell it for anything. Or Peter Thiel's notion that with enough money you can live to be 200 years old. And I think these people are a kind of new kind of authoritarian. They started out as libertarians, that is, people who believe in some kind of freedom, but the world that they've made is a world that allows space for the Donald Trumps of the world. In other words, allows us to live in a complete fantasy universe. I mean, there are 40% of the people in the United States still believe that Donald Trump won the election. I mean, they're living in a fantasy world. And so that is the world that Musk and Zuckerberg have created, and for me, it's not a good situation. And with the rise of artificial intelligence, it's only going to get worse. Your life is going to be flooded with misinformation made by AI. If you're an artist, they've already taken all your music and put it into an AI engine, and now you can literally go on the Google Music large language model and ask it to make a tune that sounds like Taylor Swift, and has a happy ending, and you give it a few other prompts, and boy, in 20 seconds it'll turn out something that sounds just like Taylor Swift. Well, what the hell? I mean, what about all the music that was taken for free without giving anybody any conception to make these models? Or what about the fact that Stable Diffusion has taken every single image of Getty Images, all of which is copyrighted, and ingested it into its engine so it can make pictures with prompts that look just like famous photographs? I mean, it's absurd. And it's these, billionaires have no concern for the rights of artists. And, I don't blame, like, the actors for going on strike. Mm-hmm. The studio suggested that they'd be able, for a one-time payment of $700, to skin the body of a background actor, what we used to call an extra, and then be able to use it ad infinitum forever and ever by putting virtual clothing on it and putting virtual hair on it and everything, but they've already scanned the person. And so free extras forever. It's absurd.
When I'll tell you a quick story here. In 2015, I was at Columbia University. I was getting my master's in journalism, and my concentration was arts and culture. And when I met with my thesis advisor, I already had my my thesis in my head. I already knew what I wanted to write about. And it might be hard for some people to understand, but in 2015, Netflix was not what Netflix is today. It was still building its brand. And they were starting to put on more shows on its platform. And I wanted to write about what I felt was dangerous because, at the time, it was all. At the time, I was focused on Netflix, but it's all streaming services. And at the time, Netflix was making a big deal that they didn't share ratings with the creative people, and they dressed us up as well. We don't, we feel ratings has been created unhealthy competition. Like it's just everyone's just chasing a number, but we don't tell them that we're not going to give out the ratings. Instead, we're going to give the creatives behind the shows artistic reign. They can come to us with a show. We like the idea. You can go make 10 episodes, however you want. We'll put it on. You're not going to get any notes from us, and so therefore, no ratings, but you're going to get creative freedom. And I thought this was dangerous because ratings, yes, maybe we obsess about ratings too much or the box office too much, but it also, at the same time, it does give me an indicator of, of a creative person, what their value is. And so I'm wondering, so my thesis was I feel that the so-called creative freedom, artistic freedom that was being offered through streamers was kind of the carrot on the stick to actually just make a worse. You nailed in 2015 one of the issues of the strike of 2023, which is what both the actors and the writers are asking for, which is transparency. Mm-hmm. The streamers will never tell anybody how well something did, and so there's no way for artists to get any more compensation out of something if something was a hit. They have no idea. I remember.
It's all secret.
I remember at Columbia we had a class where a professional songwriter came in and she talked to us, and she was talking to us about putting your music, being allowed to put your music up for on the streaming service, be it Spotify or YouTube versus the old days when you had the record labels and so forth. And she goes, there are pros and cons. And I talked to her. I go, is it safe to say that yes, the record labels would probably, they don't give you a fair contract, but yes, they gave you a contract, and unlike the streamers, the YouTubes or the Spotifys, they did give you money. They did pay you. May not be what you wanted. But they would.
I saw the checks the band was getting all through the 60s and 70s, and they were good-sized checks from Capitol Records. Mm-hmm. This is nonsense, we've substituted, analog dollars for digital dimes now. That's what you're getting. Mm-hmm. And it's, I have some music publishing assets, and I've actually photographed a couple of checks that I've gotten from ASCAP or one of these PROs, like for $1.25. I tell my wife, that's why I'm in show business, for the big money.
Right. And I'm curious, how do you feel when you see people who are relatively smart and informed? I'm talking, and I mean like journalists who are relatively smart and informed, or anyone, but they don't completely question, Elon Musk. The cult around someone like Elon Musk. People, they say, well, he's a real innovator with the SpaceX, and the rockets and so forth. But it's the bright shining object that kind of prevents them from questioning motivation.
They're sycophants.
Mm-hmm.
They fly around on his private jet, and they get impressed. Mm-hmm. They're sycophants. Walter Isaacson, one of the most famous biographers in the world, is about to put out a complete hagiography on Elon Musk, like he's some genius. He's not a genius. He didn't invent Tesla. He bought Tesla from the guy who invented Tesla. Mm-hmm. I mean, he this whole X thing, it's insane.
What?
I remember when he tried to, he's now renaming Twitter X.
What do you think? What do you think going to happen? Me and my sister, we speculate, like, okay, when or if is Twitter finally going to fall? I mean, because it has a skeletal employment now, and it's just not. It is a shell of itself. Do you think he's going to? Obviously he can afford to keep the lights on, but is he just going to offload it at some point?
Well, he's already lost $23 billion of his own money in terms of what Twitter is worth now. He admits it. He's lost $23 billion. Now, he's got a lot of money and he can afford to do that, but, I mean, he's just a hype artist. And he understood he could use Twitter to hype Tesla stock to some level where Tesla was worth more than Toyota, General Motors, and Ford combined. I mean, why? And there's enough, suckbutts who are willing, like Walter Isaacson, who are willing to listen to this and call it genius. Twitter may be one of the worst deals that has ever been made in the history of finance.
But I had this fear. I was telling my sister, I asked my sister, I go, do you think Zuckerberg will buy Twitter? And she's like, I don't know. Maybe.
No.
Maybe.
Why?
Because my conspiracy theory was that obviously he launched Threads as kind of a tit for tat for against Twitter for people who hate Twitter, come to Threads. Now, granted, it's still Zuckerberg, but it's kind of it almost seemed to be the whole the enemy of my enemy is my friend ethos with the Threads launch, and so I'm wondering to see if he's going to try to do the knockout by Twitter.
No. Why would he buy Twitter? It's not worth anything.
Mm-hmm. So, it is a fascinating subject. I mean, like I said, go round and round. And, Twitter, like I said, it doesn't have the luster that it once had. And I told my sister, I go, I believe one of the reasons Ron DeSantis is flailing, for other than the obvious reasons, is that launch was a disaster. And you cannot have a disastrous launch. And he had that...
I agree.
That Twitter...
I totally agree. It's Elon's fault.
Yeah, and it's the same reason why Beto, he stumbled out of the gate with that Vanity Fair launch. I was born to be president, and I was like, nope.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I was like, nope. He just stumbled out the gate. Beto's not gonna. He just lost all his momentum. And
it's too bad too, because Beto was a brilliant politician. He just that one's a sad one. Ron DeSantis is, I'm just as happy he's not going to be president, you know.
Right. Right. Well, like I said, I'll wrap this up. So I just wanted to, thank you for this. Like I said, Main Streets is very important. Like I said, it's very important, and that soundtrack is very important. So I just want to thank you for, sharing these stories.